Before I start, how many of you are on 12C already?
Yeah.
Your production database on 12C?
We do have. You is running on 12C.
Nice.
I work in.
So you probably know many of the 12C features, but there may be a few that you don't know. Let's see. So I already talked about OneNeck. OneNeck is owned by TDS, and we do all of this stuff: the cloud, managed hosting, co-location, ERP management, hardware and software, professional services. We do all of this stuff. So OneNeck.com is where you can get more information. And this is about me. I'm a solution architect with OneNeck. I've been with OneNeck more than 10 years now. Over 20 years, because once you are in that 20 years, they said like, just say 20 years, over 20 years Oracle, so it's good. So 20 years of Oracle database experience, development and administration. Last 10 years involved in the Oracle E-Business Suite, administration, not administration, architecture and performance tuning. Got a few books. The first one came out in 2000. If you are Oracle certified, you probably came across my books because I've been publishing them from 8i through 12c. I have the OCA, OCP books for certification. And I'm an ACE director. So this is what I'm going to do today in this session. So I'm going to list a few features that I thought are interesting for the DBAs as well as developers. They are not the top ones. Like I'm not going to talk about multi-tenancy or multi-tenancy architecture or anything like that. And this is like when you upgrade the database from 11G to 12C or 10G to 12C, how it is going to behave for you and what are the changes or the features that you can make use of or utilize immediately. That's what this session is going to be concentrating here. And I'll be talking about a lot of sessions when I have about 90 seconds for each slide or less than that. So it will be at a high level. You can always Google and find more information if you need anything, or I have written about some of those features in my blog also. Oracle 12.2 is out. I don't know how many of you are aware of it or using. It's not available for, GA is not available, it's available only in the cloud because Oracle changed their policy and announced in the last Open World that their software and pretty much all the software releases will be cloud first. So they have the 12.2 database available on the cloud. If you subscribe to Oracle Cloud Services, you can access 12.2 database, which is a good thing. I mean, they will fix all the bugs before it is available for GA, so you can upgrade right away. So I'll start with some of the 12.2 features and then go to 12.1. You know how in 11G and 12C, when you have multiple data guard instances, when you change the password in the primary, you have to copy the password file to the standby databases. If you forget to do that, your standby will break because invalid password, username password error you get. In 12C, any user ID or any password you change in the primary, that is in the password file, like with the sysdba or sysoffer privileges, they will be in the password file. And as soon as you change the password file is synced with all the standby. So if you have 10 standby databases, you change the password in the primary, it will be synced on all the databases. So one less thing to worry about. That's one. And in 11G, there are read-only tables. So you can do alter table, read-only in 11G. In 12C, they extended it, 12C released 2. They extended it to partitions and subpartitions. So you can mark a single partition as read-only partition. So for example, if you have a table that is partitioned by date or quarter or year, and you don't want to touch the old partitions, that they are not being changed. So normally today what we have to do is like we move those partitions to a table space and then mark that table space as read only. Here you can mark the partitions as read only. The table will still be read write, but you can mark certain partitions as read only. That's available in Revist. We also have the automatic list partitions. In 11G we have automatic range partitions. Like you can specify that if I create a monthly partition, if you see any date above that higher range, just create a partition for that month or whatever that quarter or that year. Oracle will create automatic range partitions in 11G. In 12C, Oracle is giving an option to create automatic list partitions. So in the example here, I'm creating a partition like on the S1 column, saying automatic and the value AC. When you create the automatic list partition, there should be at least one partition in the table. So when I insert a row with a different value, like the value is AC for S1, if I insert another value into this column and a partition is not there, Oracle will create a partition and insert that row into that new partition. So you don't have to worry about all the different values that are going to be in that table. Oracle will automatically create the partition for you. That's in 12.2, the automatic list partitions. And when you have the automatic list partition, you cannot have a default partition because right now in 11G and 12.1, you can have a default partition where all the rows that doesn't fit into any of the partition will go into the default partition. Whereas when you have this automatic list partition, the default is no longer valid because Oracle is going to create a partition for every value, then default has no meaning there. There are a lot of improvements in the partitioning in 12.2. Another big one is you can convert a non-partition table to partition table online without using DBMS redefinition. Right now, if you have to do it online, when users are using the table, convert a table from partition to non-partition or non-partition to partition, you have to use DBMS redefinition or take an outage to do that. Whereas in 12.2, you just do an alter table and then use the clause online, then it is done. Much easier. I haven't tried this on a big table and see what blocking issues and other issues are going to be there, but the feature is there. So,
Let's try it and then you try
all right.
it.
In SQL Plus also, there are some improvements in SQL Plus as well. This one, people have been asking this for a long time, the history in SQL Plus. So what are the commands we executed earlier, show the history and re-execute those commands. It is available in 12.2 SQL Plus. So if you want to start using this in your 11G or 12.1 database, maybe you can install the 12.2 client and then start using it. So show history will show all the whether history is off or on. Then you say set history on. Then it will show once you set it on, all the commands executed will be listed when you do the history command. And if you want to run the second one, you just say hist to run. So it will run the second one from the history list. So you don't have to retype or copy paste. So that history is available in 12.2. This is also something good, set feedback only. That option is also good this is similar to like we say set auto trace feedback only, right? Where you don't want to see the result, you just want to see the explain plan only. So similar to that, set feedback only means it won't display all the rows. It will just tell you how many rows returned. So if there are if you say select star from hr.emp or employees table, it will just say 106 because that table has 106 rows usually.
So with the history, you type history to run it, and then that's the one you have in the buffer.
Right.
So if you have one that you want to edit, then that's the way to bring it back to the buffer.
Right. You just put the hist and number 2, it will bring it back to the buffer, and then if you want to edit, you can edit it. If you do hist number 2 and run, it will execute that statement. And it is for the session. Okay. So if you want to recall one from a previous session, it's not available.
Right.
So this is only for that one session. This is, okay, feedback. So this is just the number of rows you want to see. And we all use set markup HTML today to get HTML output from C++ so that the formatting and everything looks pretty. In 12.2, set markup CSV is also available. So if you want to have the output in a comma separated value, comma separated files, you can export that values into a file. So you just do set markup CSV instead of giving you an output with a lot of spaces. It will just give you comma separated value output.
That's another one that people are asking for.
Right, people have been asking for this markup also, the CSV comma separated one for a long time. That's C++ in 12.2. And anyone using pluggable databases in 12c? Do you use pluggable? Use. So in the pluggable database architecture, we have a lot of pluggable databases, but in 12.1, the undo table space is shared. The undo is shared among all the pluggable databases. So it had a drawback because you cannot flashback. You cannot use flashback to flashback 1, or you cannot do flashback on one pluggable database alone. Or again, recovery of the database. You cannot do it on one pluggable database alone because you have to do the entire container database. So now in 12.2, they made the undo table space local to the pluggable database. So each pluggable database is truly a single database now, because the undo database belonging to that pluggable database is within that pluggable database. So now you have the option of recovering that pluggable database or duplicating that without affecting the other databases, and recovering one pluggable database. It's all possible because they moved the undo locally. That is the default. But if you are upgrading from 12.1 to 12.2, shared undo is it is not going to change when you upgrade. When you create a new database, it is local undo. When you upgrade, it is still shared. You need to manually change it by adjusting the parameter, local undo.
Issue?
Yeah.
Those two statements go on in the PDB.
It's on the
Do you do anything in the CDB to allow this?
When you run this in no, this is on the PDB only.
Okay, but does the CDB need to know this is happening?
No, doesn't have to. CDB level, I mean, it's undo, but you just set this local undo enabled in that PDB, and you specify which undo table space that is. And if you have to change the undo, you have to. It's not an alter system parameter thing. You have to start up upgrade, then do database local undo on or off. When you do that. Yeah, this is at the container level. So yeah, at the container level it knows whether it is undo on or off. Yeah, you do it at the container level here. And this is the link to read more about it, about the undo. The next one is PDB lockdown profile. This is interesting. You see, right now when there are some higher privileged system privileges available today, like the alter system. If you want to give alter session or alter system to a user, he can do all the clauses in alter system, no matter what, like alter system, flush, share code, alter system, change a parameter. All of that you can do with alter system system privilege. If you want to lock that down in a particular PDB, you want a user to have alter system, but not all the clauses in alter system be available in that pluggable database. You can restrict that using PDB lockdown profiles. So in this example, here we are creating a lockdown profile called medium, and I'm saying disable the statement alter system altogether. So even if the user has alter system privilege, that statement is completely disabled in that PDB. Nobody can run alter system unless you have sysdba privilege. Then I'm creating a lockdown profile, modifying the same lockdown profile and enabling the statement for alter system, just use flush share pool. So you are only allowed to do flush share pool with the alter system in that PDB. It doesn't matter what privileges you have. You have given alter system privilege, but you cannot do anything else. So if you do alter system set parameter, you'll say insufficient privileges error. Similarly here at the session level also, you can do that. I'm doing alter session here. And if any user has an alter session privilege, in this PDB, they can only run SQL trace and optimizer mode. No other alter session allowed for any of that, any user. So you are restricting the privilege available for a system privilege with the lockdown profile. And DBA underscore profiles, that hasn't seen any change for the last 2 releases. There were the resources for DBA profile were introduced in 10G. In 11G there were no changes. In 12.1 there were no changes. But in 12.2 there is one more resource got added. It is called inactive account time. So it is for the security. Right now you have an account to expire password after a certain number of days. That is available. And you have a grace period also you can define. But this one, with this profile option, you can make sure that a user has not logged into the database for a certain number of days, then the account gets automatically logged. No matter the password change time may be like 60 days or 6 months, but if he hasn't logged into the database for 30 days, just lock the account. Probably he hasn't used it for 2 months, there is no need to keep the account, just lock the account automatically. So tightening the security a little bit more. And if you use pluggable databases and you have a huge server with a lot of resources, if 252 is not enough, in 12.2, the maximum number of PDBs you can have is 4096. That many PDBs you can have in 12.2. There is another use with this parameter. I mean, when you set the max PDBs, because in 12.c, even though Oracle says 12.c, you can have multi-tenancy with multiple pluggable databases. And the non-CDB architecture is going away or depreciated. That's what deprecated. That's what Oracle says. With this max PDBs, I see a value in there, because if you are not licensed for multi-tenancy and you are not supposed to create more than 1 PDB in your container database, because in a container architecture, 1 PDB is included in your license. If you want to create more than 1, that's a paid option. Yes.
Why is there a difference between the 4096 and 4098? What accounts for the 2 there?
Right. The 2 is there are 2 by default always there. That's why it is a root pluggable, the root container as well as the seed database. So the root and seed are there. It is included in the count. That's why I have to say the actual pluggable database you can create is 4096. But the parameter includes those 2 as well, the root as well as the seed database. So with the max PDBs, you can restrict the number of PDBs you can create in that container database. So if you are not licensed and you don't want anybody to create a pluggable database in Oracle, because once you create it, it will be there in the in your database usage table that hey, number of databases created is 2 or more. So if there is a license audit, I mean it will be there. But with this parameter, you can restrict that it doesn't happen. That's good.
So what value would you set it to? 1 or
1, yeah, PDB is 1. And a few more 12.2 before I go to 12.1 features. There is a new administrative privilege called sysrack. So in 12.1 we had like sysdg and a few other privileges, but there is another system privilege called sysrack. It is only for rack databases to do the rack related or cluster related activities. So if you give somebody sysrack system privilege, then they can do only the cluster related, like whatever CRCTL and SRVCTL. And when you log into SRVCTL, by default it uses sysrack privilege instead of the sysdg privilege. So that is one. There is a new initialization parameter which I think is interesting. Allow group access to SGA. So right now you have multiple databases running in a server, and each database is owned by different user. For example, you have a dev user or a dev or a test or a QA. There are 3 databases running, and you have 3 operating system accounts managing those three databases, because this is typical in EBS, because in EBS you probably want to separate the database and the environment completely different. So if you have three different operating system accounts running three databases, then if they all belong to the DBA group, you can manage any database by logging into any of the accounts, because they are part of the DBA group, and you can manage database. You can start up, shut down. But by default in 12.2, you cannot do that, because you have to log in as the owner of that database, or that software owner of that database. Then only you can do shutdown, startup, unless you set this parameter saying that allow group access to SGA. Then it will behave as the group will have the access to SGA. Otherwise, you don't have access to SGA if you log in as another user with the DBA group. You don't have that. That's by default. So if you want to have your pre-12.2 behavior, you need to set this parameter to true. And the maximum length of many of the object names increase from 30 bytes to 128 bytes.
Oh, wow.
So this is a real big limitation when you have a long table name and you have a standard that your primary keys will have pk underscore the table name, or fk underscore the table name, or table name underscore idx1, idx2. Then you don't have that. Then you have to create. So that restriction is going away in 12.2. I mean, you can have up to 128 bytes for the names. So
That's good.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, though.
Yeah, right.
Makes for a really long sequel.
Yeah, no.
Right. You have to type more.
That's
For every sequel.
Yep.
And you can also have a temporary table space for each rack instance. So rack instance, normally the table space is shared among all the rack instances. If you want to control the I/O that's going in the one instance for better performance, you can create local temporary table spaces that is visible only for one rack instance. So that's the performance improvement. And if you wanna try 12.2 SQL without getting a cloud access, you can go to livesql.oracle.com. How many of you are familiar with LiveSQL? It's basically giving you a learning platform for developers. You can go to livesql.oracle.com and you log in with your Oracle, single sign-on. Then you get a session, and you get a session and schema, and you can create tables, you can run SQL, all of that. That is using 12.2, so you can test out all the 12.2 features in LiveSQL. But the better one would be to create a cloud database so that you can do all the DBA features as well. Here you get to do only the SQL features. And I also tweet pretty much every weekday, and recently in the last couple of months I've been doing 12CR2. They are all hashtagged with the DB12CR2, so you can click on this link or search with the DB12CR2 hashtag, and you see a lot of features like this in 12C release 2. And if you search 12CR1, you probably see about 3 years old or 2 years old tweets and Google plus things with the 12.1 features. So let's jump into some of the 12.1 features. Partial indexes. I think this is really good if you have OLTP as well as a data warehouse workload in the same database. You can create duplicate indexes, or you can create multiple indexes on the same on the table on the same columns. For example, you have OLTP workload during the day and DSS workload or data warehouse kind of workload in the night. You want to have a bitmap index in the night and B-tree index during the day when people are accessing and making changes. You could create two indexes on the same column. One is a bitmap index, one is a B-tree index. But for that particular session, you make whichever index available or needed for that user. So for a session, there can be only one index visible. The other index need to be invisible. So you can create duplicate index, but only one index is visible to that session. So that way Oracle won't get confused. So you need to make the index visible or invisible for the indexes you don't need. But you can create a partition index and a non-partition index, B-tree and bitmap, or function-based, but different properties you can use and have the same columns for the index.
Let's change at the session level.
You can do it to session level here, modify it.
So you have two sessions at the same time and each one using a different.
Yeah, because you make the index visible for you at that session. Both indexes are completely synced and available. You are telling Oracle at this session, I want to make use of index 1 instead of index 2. But they both are on the same point.
Can
But
this
different
be
characters.
specified for user level?
Session level, right? So,
User session level.
right. If you want to do it at the user level, you create a log on trigger and then do that.
You would create a what, like if you wanted to do it up for on a user session level, how would you implement that?
You can create a log on trigger. I mean,
Okay.
Session level. So when the user session logs in, fires the trigger and then sets everything for you.
Okay.
Yeah, you can create it using a log on trigger. Read privilege. If you are really concerned about the security in the database, you can start using read privilege instead of select privilege. Because with select privilege, it comes with a locking privilege also. When you give somebody select privilege, they have the ability to lock the table or lock the rows in the table. If you want to control that, because you want to give them only true read-only privilege, then you start using a read privilege. That's available in 12.1.2. So if you give somebody select any table privilege, they can use lock table in exclusive mode, even though they are a read-only. It's a read-only privilege, and they can also run select for update. Select column names from table for update. Then those rows will be locked. With read privilege, they cannot do any of this. They cannot use the exclusive lock table, or they cannot use select for update. They can only run the select statements. So select object privilege, read object privilege, as well as read any system privilege also available. This is a major feature in 12c, online data file move. In 11g, for us to move or rename a data file or move the file from one location to another, you have to definitely take the table space offline and then use an operating system command to copy the file or move the file to the new location. Then you update the control file using alter database rename file or alter table space rename data file. So you have to use these steps here and then bring the table space online. And if you have to do this on a system or sysaux table space, you have to shut down the database, start the database in mount mode and do it. With 12c, all of that goes away. All you do is alter database, move data file X to Y, the old name to the new name. It just takes care of everything. It moves it for you, even the operating system level, it moves it for you. And you can omit the to clause. If you don't specify the to clause, then the file will be moved to the location you specified in this parameter, db create file test, as an Oracle managed file. One drawback with this command, I won't say drawback, but that's a little hard word, is that you can only specify one file at a time. Whereas with the alter database rename file or alter table space rename file, you can specify a bunch of files before the two and a bunch of files after the two, so that correspondingly it will rename. Multiple files you can specify. Whereas here you can specify only one file. That's not a big deal. I mean, you just specify one by one, write a script and then specify one by one. But that's one limitation.
Can this be used to move from non-ASM to ASM kind of?
Correct. So you can move system table space file also can be moved. You can move file from ASM disk group to file system, or from file system to ASM also you can do that. Or ASM to ASM. You can use this statement to move that. So it's all very easy. You don't have to worry about taking the table space offline, moving the file or anything. Whether you are converting from file system to ASM or ASM to file system or ASM disk group to another disk group, it's all automated. You can do that. And if for some reason you want to keep the original file at the original location because you are so scared Oracle will make a mistake when moving, then you can use the keep clause if you want to leave the old file over there.
But so you had certain steps that you needed to do before to move from non-ASM to ASM kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
all those go away now?
All
Basically,
that
you
goes
just-
away if you use this one, yes.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. This is also around the security. Now when you log into SQL Plus, I mean, you'll see that when you logged in successfully last time, like similar to most of the Unix servers, you log in, it shows you when was the last time you logged in. Similarly, in SQL Plus also, it shows you when was the last time you logged in into the database. I haven't updated this slide for a long time, it's 2013 data. Last login time is available, and this information is kept in the sys.user table. And I just listed few more columns there. If you're not familiar with this, these are the columns available in 11gr2. The seed time. I mean, if you want to look at the seed time when the user got created, or when the password was last changed. If you want to know, like, okay, when the user password was last changed, you can look at the user table and query the p time value, that is last time changed, or when the account was locked last time, how many failed login attempts, because you have a profile that is waiting for you to lock your account after 10 failed attempts or so many failed attempts you specify in the profile. So Oracle is keeping track of that, how many failed attempts. So you can see here, and the password column is there. I mean, this is the encrypted case insensitive password. It is the 10G version. But if you are using 11G version, you have to look for the password spare 6 column. It's called spare 6. Spare 4. Spare 6 is the last login time. So there are other spare columns also in that table. They are not yet used. In the future release, it will get used. But the value is available, and the last login time is stored here. In many companies, they have a requirement to know when a user last logged into the database, because they want to inactivate the account or identify the usage, and for that simple purpose, we need to enable auditing, session auditing. With this feature, you don't have to enable that. The session auditing is not needed because it's automatically tracked.
And it's in the DBA user view too.
Yeah. Right.
How long it will keep the data? Will it go forever?
Yeah, it will be there forever. For that user, when the last time the user got logged in, right? So when you log in today, that will get updated to today's time. It's not track of all the logins.
Okay.
It's the last
It won't
login.
keep the history.
It won't keep the history, it will just be last login.
So for the history, you still need the order.
All right. If you want the history, you still need audit. Truncate statement in 11G. If you have to truncate a table, you have to disable all the foreign keys to the table, and then truncate the child table or the foreign key related tables, and then truncate the parent key. Whereas in 12C, you don't have to disable any of the foreign keys if the foreign key is defined with on-delete cascade option. So if your foreign key is defined with on-delete cascade option and you truncate the parent table, all the children will get truncated automatically. So it's just one statement, less work. You don't have to go through all the disabling of foreign keys, enabling foreign keys, truncating them individually. You just truncate the parent, all the children will get truncated. The only requirement is that you should have defined the foreign key with on-delete cascade option, and the foreign key must be enabled status. Whereas in 11G, to truncate a table, the foreign key must be disabled status.
Would there be a way to truncate without disabling the foreign keys, but also ensuring that there weren't any child records? If that makes sense? Like,
Right. So when you use this one, it will truncate the child table. So it's not the record. All the records from the child table will be truncated because you are truncating the parent.
Okay.
So all the children will be truncated.
Because in 11G, even if there are no child records,
You still have to disable,
the
yes.
foreign keys.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, that behavior hasn't changed. I mean, if you don't want to truncate the whole table, you want to remove only few rows or there are no rows there, then yeah.
Okay.
Because you're truncating, right? So when you truncate the parent, there is no reason to keep any children because all the children need to be truncated. So that's why this is. The next one is the online class is supported in many DDO statements. So you can do a lot of DBA activity without waiting for that activity to complete. I mean, you just say online, so you don't have to worry about the locking in the system. You can do that activity online. For example, you can drop an index. I mean, right now in 11G, if you are in our OLTP system and somebody has run a query and that index was used or is being used, then you cannot drop that index. You shouldn't drop an index, it should be used, but anyway. If you have to recreate or recreate an index with a different column set or something like that, and you are trying to do that, and somebody else is using that index, you have to keep hitting the slash and try again and again and again, hoping that you'll get a lock. But with this online, I mean, you just do that, and when it gets a lock, it'll complete and it'll come back and try it for it. Similarly, the online can be used for alter index, unusable rebuild, column unused, dropping a constraint, moving a table partition, moving a table subpartition. All of this, the online class is supported. So you can do all of this with all of this online. And Tulsi also had Tulsi release 1 also had a lot of partition improvement. Partitioning is a paid option, so Oracle always makes improvement in partitioning. You can do multiple partition management in 12C. Basically, you can merge multiple partitions. You just list out all the partitions and what the new partition name should be. You can do that. In 11G, for you to do this activity, you can merge only 2 partitions at a time in 11G. So you merge Q1 to Q2 and take that partition, merge with Q3, take that partition, merge with Q4. Whereas in 12C, you just list all the partitions and specify the new partition name. So in 11G, you will do this and this into this, then take this and this and this and this. That's how you merge. Whereas in 12C, you can do all of that. Similarly, you can also specify. I mean, if it is a range of partitions, instead of listing out all the partitions, you can specify Q1 to Q4. You can use the to clause. You don't even have to list out all the partitions. You just say this partition to this partition, just merge into this partition. Which is good because you have a large database. You maintain weekly partitions, and at the end of the year, you merge all the weekly partitions into a yearly partition for a table. If you do something like that, this is handy. Similarly,
how does it know the range? How does it know what's in between? Is that alphabetical?
Yeah, because when you are creating partition, you're specifying a range, right, from April to May. So that's with that range. So if you specify from here to here, whatever range is simply to be, it will merge all of that. Similarly, you can also split into multiple partitions. Right now, in 11G, you can split a partition only into 2 partitions, whereas in 12C, you can split a partition into multiple partitions you want. So if you are converting a yearly partition into quarterly partition or monthly partition, you would run the SQL like 12 times. Whereas here you just run one SQL with all the partition range values. So you can do that. Then you can add multiple partitions in one SQL statement. You can drop multiple partitions in a SQL statement. You can truncate multiple partitions in one SQL statement. All of this can be done in one SQL statement. So multiple partitions can be managed in a SQL statement. We all know about the PGA aggregate target parameter, which is a target. I mean, it's not a limit. If some process needs more than the target, it uses that much memory. So if you have a lot of databases or multiple databases running on a server, and your server is memory constrained, and you really want to limit the PGA usage so that you are not swapping, you can use the parameter PGA aggregate limit. And on the flip side is, if you have a huge server where your database is only consuming 40% of the memory, and you want to have the rest of the memory available for large sorting operations, then you need to, there also you have to use this parameter because there is a default limit. If you don't set this parameter, it's either 2 GB or 200% of PG aggregate target or 3 MB times process parameter. So if you want more than that, you need to set this parameter to a higher value. Otherwise, you start getting errors in your alert log that, I mean, the PGA exhausted, you cannot do this sorting in the memory. That error will be there. PGA aggregate target is still available, same behavior. Listener in 11G, it was the responsibility of the PMON process to register with the listener with the instance, register the instance with the listener and making the connections and load balancing and all those stuff were the responsibility of PMON process. In 12C, Oracle created a separate process for that. It's a mandatory process, very important process. If it dies, your system database will go down. So the process name is LREG, listener registration. That's new. So part of PMON's responsibility is taken by LREG. One reason is that when you have 252 pluggable databases, each pluggable database needs to have at least one service running for you to connect. So it is too much job for the PMON to manage and do those listener registrations and managing the load of the PDB and stuff like that. So they separated that activity from PMON into listener registration. I had this already. You can do automatic stats during bulk load. So when you are loading a table or a partition, like a create table as select or insert into select, and there are no existing rows in that partition or the table. If you're loading fresh rows into the partition, Oracle will automatically collect stats on the partition or the table. You don't have to do a DBMS stats, table statistics after the load. It will be unnecessary waste of resource and time. It does that automatically. You don't have to do anything. There is no parameters set. It's automatic. And this is for developers, and DBS can also use this. If you want to know distinct values of in a column, we normally use count distinct and the column name. We use that. And if the table has billions of rows, then it is going to run for a few minutes or probably hours, depending on your storage speed. Oracle uses a hyperlog algorithm when you collect statistics. That's how your statistics is going faster. I mean, it just needs to know an approximate number of rows in that column, because it doesn't have to be exact. I mean, if you have billions of rows in the table, 1 or 2 rows difference doesn't make any difference in the execution plan, optimizer execution plan. So it uses a hyperlog algorithm that enables Oracle to do the count real fast. So Oracle has taken that algorithm and then given you that as a function. So you just say, instead of the count distinct, I just want to know approximate count. I mean, if it's a 12 billion row table, I mean 12 billion, 1001 and 1003 doesn't make any difference for me. I mean, you just need to know what is the ballpark number of rows in there. So instead of using that count distinct and waiting on it, you just do approx count distinct. I mean, this day and night difference in the performance of that query. So you can start using that. And in 12.2, Oracle improved this feature quite a bit, because this feature they thought, I mean, this is beneficial for all the data warehouse workloads. So they came up with a lot of approx underscore functions. So you see that approx count distinct is available in 11G. Sorry, 12C release 1. Approx count distinct detail, aggregation, approx count distinct, two approx count distinct, and approx percentage aggregate, many functions, and I have a link in the bottom, so you can review that. And there is a parameter is also available where if there is any count distinct value is there, should Oracle substitute that count distinct with approx count. So if you set the parameter approx for aggregation, this init parameter, set approx for initialize approx for aggregation. If you set it to true, and if somebody does an approx count of that column, it will substitute that function with approx count function and then get you the result faster. So you can, instead of rewriting your code, I mean, you can set this parameter, so wherever Oracle can substitute this function with the old style function, it will do it for you.
Would it do it for both select distinct and select unique?
No, no, this is count distinct. That's only.
Okay.
Yeah. Not distinct, not select distinct. That's not that. This is count and distinct values in that column. One column we're trying to find out.
And it would do that for unique as well? The count on unique?
Yeah, count and unique. Yeah, distinct and unique both are same, right? So.
Oh, okay.
Both are the same. And in 12C, similar to the 128 character we saw, in varchar 2.
Vijay?
Yes.
There's a question?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, is the approximate count distinct function actually accurate for small tables?
Small tables, for small tables, what I've seen, it is accurate. But you are not saving much time there because it does the same thing. Few
It's
seconds.
just out of curiosity.
Yeah,
whether
it is
use
close.
it,
Yeah.
basically.
Whatever I have done, I mean, I've played with HR schema and stuff for the smaller tables. They always give the right number. But if you are in the 500,000 range, I don't know if it's going to be. But it was very close. I mean, even the billion row table, it is very close. I mean, it is within the 4 or 5 row difference. So it's very close. varchar 2 or in varchar 2 and raw. In 11G, in 11G for that matter, every version before 11G and before, had a limitation of 4 kilobyte. 4096 is the max you can have for a varchar 2 column, type column. In 12C, you can go up to 32K. So 32767 bytes you can go. This is good in the sense that, I mean, you want to store some values that are beyond 4K but less than 32K, and you want to create an index on it or something like that. Because if you, in 11G, if it is more than 4K, you have to use a CLOB data type. And on CLOB data type, you cannot create an index or anything like that. So for that reason, it is good. And Oracle introduced this feature because JSON is available in 12C database itself. So for XML and JSON, you typically have column with larger values because your XML code is bigger, your JSON code is bigger than 4K. So basically, they want to store that information in 4K. That's how you get this. So if your application uses a lot of XML and JSON and you want to store that information in the table, you probably want to increase it to 32K. And once you increase it, you cannot go back. You cannot say, sorry, I don't want to go, I want to go back to use 4K. It's not possible. Once you extended it, you have to recover the database if you want to go back. So once you think twice or thrice before you decide to go, and once you enable it, it invalidates all the views, materialized views, everything. You need to compile all of that. And if you have a container database and multiple pluggable database, each pluggable database can have a different value. So, for example, you can change that on each pluggable database. You can say pluggable database 1, 2, 3 want to be extended and others need not be extended. So instead of setting it at the container database level, you can do it at the pluggable database level. So this is for non-pluggable database or non-container database. You have to start the database in upgrade mode, then change the settings, then run a script, utl32k.sql, then start the database. So it is a big change if you want to make that max string size. Invisible columns is available in 12C. There may be very few reasons why you want to make a column invisible, but there may be a reason where you want to do it. One reason I can think about is your application, the users are using your application and you want to roll out a change into the system. You are going to add a column to a table, and you make the column invisible so that you can continue with the change and all the stuff. So if you are using select star or any of that kind of SQL, unless you specify the column name, it is invisible for the session or for the SQL. So your code need not be changed immediately after the table is altered. And you can have a table with an invisible column. or you want to track some other information in that column. You don't want everybody or the users or developers to see that. Then you can track that information in that invisible column. So one caveat you need to be careful with invisible column is you have to be very careful when you make a column invisible, because you make a mistake and say that, oops, wrong table, and you make it visible. Yes, it is visible. What happened is the column order already changed. When you make a table column invisible and make it visible, the column becomes the last column in the table because the column ID changed. So it becomes the last column. So if you have a select star from the table, what is happening? Instead of coming at the second position, it's coming at the very last position. So you have your code is not, your pure SQL code or SQL code is not following the best practices. You have select star, insert into so and so, or select into, then that code is going to break because I mean, if it breaks, that is good. If both columns are the same data type and same length, then
It's gonna be
you are doing bigger damage. It's not failing, but it is populating wrong column with wrong value. So you have to be very careful with this.
VP is going to come see you with a report in his hand.
You cannot make a primary column as invisible column, right?
Primary key
Primary
column.
key
No,
column
no,
or-
no. There are some restrictions of that.
Would there be a column for that in the DBA tables view?
Yeah, there is a view there. When you make invisible, the column is still there. You can still insert into that column. You can select that column. Only thing is like you have to specify the column name explicitly.
Okay.
If you just say select star or insert into without the column specification, then you won't get into that. You won't see that.
Were you asking about the DBA?
Yeah, like if there would be a Y or an N for
Right.
like
Yes,
visible
this is
columns.
visible yes or no. It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can typical users see that, like in the user tables?
Yes, yeah, you can see.
Okay, so it's not like it's completely hidden
No,
from them, it's just
if,
not gonna
if,
be
yeah,
noticed.
if your user is smart enough to go look in there, yeah, they can see it. And if you want to see all the invisible columns by default in SQL Plus, when you do the describe command, you can say set column invisible on. Then when you do the describe, it will show the column name. That's John Marcus.
I think the idea is that if you've got a bunch of software where people did select asterisk, or what you can do is add columns without.
But making it visible, right? Yeah.
So if you don't have that, you've got regular columns, you can add columns to a table without breaking existing applications.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the idea.
Right. So yeah, right. You are not following the best practice, and you are a bunch of code where you have insert statements and select statements at the start. Then you can use this feature to add a column to the table, and whenever you want to use it, you explicitly specify that column name. So that is invisible column. Some more SQL here. In 11G, to restrict or limit the number of limit the rows you are selecting from a table, we typically use the where clause. Whereas there is a row limiting clause available here. You can say offset and fetch. So you can fetch the first few rows or next few rows. You can specify by the row count or by percentage. I'll show some examples here. So this is good in the sense here I'm selecting from employees tables the first and ordering by the salary in descending order. So this SQL gives me the top salaries from that table. So I'm saying fetch first 5 rows. So these are the top salaries in that table. Fetch 5 rows. So you don't have to use that top end query, subqueries and all this kind of stuff. You can use this fetch. With the fetch you can get that. And you can also use, instead of the number of rows, you can specify the percentage also. Here you already got the first 2 rows you have run. Next time you want to see the next 3 rows. So you say offset 2 rows. I'm not interested in the first 2, but give me the next 3. So this is offset 2 rows, then fetch the next 3. And if there is tie, then show me both. That's what with ties. So here you can see there is a tie between 17,000 and 17,000. Even though I'm telling it to fetch only first 2 rows, since I use the with ties, I'm getting all the rows that has a tie. So I'm actually getting 3 rows instead of 2. So that is with ties. If you're DBA and you do a lot of patches, and when you're applying more than one patch, in one outage on a database, you have to look at the README file of each patch and see if there's a script need to be run after the patch. In 12c, you do data patch to run all the post-patch scripts. And when you have 10 patches, when you apply 10 patches, and if you run data patch, it knows all the post-patch scripts to run, and it will run it automatically for you. You don't have to specify which scripts to run from where, or all the stuff you don't have to specify. And also, you don't have to remember which order to run the scripts and stuff like that. Oracle will take care of everything automatically. You apply the patch using OPatch, then once your database is up, you run data patch, it will run all the scripts for you in the database to complete the patch process. And to know what are the patches applied on a database, today you have to log into the server as a DBA group user or the software owner, and then run ls inventory, OPatch ls inventory you have to run. The patch information is available in the database, so you can log into the database using SQL Plus with somebody has the execute privilege on DBMS QO patch package. Then you can use the patch list and these procedures and functions to get all the patch information. So this is good if you have a repository where you populate from all the databases, and then you keep that one in sync with the database. So you can have one place to see all the reporting, or if you want to do a reporting of all the patches applied on database, instead of logging into each server and doing it, you can use with SQL Plus or PL/SQL. Some of the security defaults also changed. Audit sys operations is true by default in 12c. This is all when you create a new database. When you upgrade, these things are not the same. There are a couple of new roles available, security roles, audit admin and audit viewer. This is to look at the who can view the unified audit trail. There is a new password functions available. There is a password or a 12c verify function and 12c strong verify function. So there's a little bit difference in how many characters and which characters can be used. That's the strong. So those two are available by default. You can take this and make changes according to your requirement. In 11g, when you grant somebody a resource role, like grant connect resource to a user, it also grants unlimited table space. It is no longer doing that in 12c. You don't get the unlimited table space. So when you create a user, you have to either grant unlimited table space or make the user quota in each table space appropriately. Otherwise, the user cannot create, or the schema cannot create tables. Unified audit trail is there. Pretty much every auditing is going into one table or one view, unified _audit _trail. So you don't have to go look into DBA audit session, or FGA fine grain auditing is going to different table. Data pump auditing is going to different table. All of that goes into one table only. It is unified audit trail. So, but you have to enable that. By default, it is not enabled. And all the audit information is now going into a schema called AUDSYS. So that's where all the audit information is kept. So unified audit trail, single location, single table, unified interface, everything goes in here. So your standard auditing, SUS auditing, fine-grained auditing, data pump, SQL loader, Vault, level security, RMAN, real application security, all of the auditing, it all goes into one location. So you just have to remember one name, unified audit trail. This is also interesting. I mean, there is a DBA link _info available in this context namespace. So right now in 11g database, you have a distributed database environment where you have a lot of databases and you connect them using DB links. And when you are troubleshooting a session, and you see that, okay, that's connecting as a DB link username. That's all the information you see here. It's coming from some other database using a DB link. Okay, the DB link is connecting here with a generic ID. So you don't have much information, much visibility. Who is the person connecting into my database, in this database, using the database link and messing up this database with a bad query. You got to find that out. So you can use this context DB link info namespace and specify that SID and serial number. It will give you the details from the other database. what is the OS user, what is the SID, and the serial number in the other database that is coming, initiated that DB-Link. So it is good for you to troubleshoot a user where the user is originally coming from. So the same information is available in the unified audit trail also if you have the DB-Link info is there. So it shows you, I mean, if a session was created by a DB-Link in the database, who is the real user who created the session in the other database. That information is available in unified audit trail. That is not available in your sys.aud log. It's not available. And you can connect to lower version, even though Oracle says that if you use 8i client, you cannot connect to a 12c database. Or if you use 12c database, you cannot use DB-Link to connect to a 9i database because they are more than 2 versions apart. So there are a few parameters available: SQLnet logon version client, SQLnet allowed logon version server. So if I set this parameter in my SQLnet in my 12c database, if somebody is using an 8i client, they can connect to the 12c database without any error. But they won't be able to use any 12c features, but they can connect and use all the 8i features in the database, selecting table and those kind of stuff. It's not really needed, but Oracle EBS uses it because Oracle EBS 11i allows you to connect to 12c database. And EBS 11i uses, 806 client still. so that's probably why they created this. I mean, we need a way to connect to 12c database. So you can use that. Similarly, if you have a database link that connecting to 9i database, if you set the logon version server as 9, then you can connect to your 9i database using database link. But if you don't specify that, you'll get a link that these connections are no longer supported. That error will get. And you go to Metalink and Metalink says, yeah, this is not supported. Datapump has a few enhancements. The notable one is when you are doing import into a Datapump import, and you don't want to generate archive logs because it's a huge table you are trying to import, and you don't worry about recovery of the table. You can specify a transform disable archive logging, disable archive underscore logging. Then when Oracle creates that table, it will create the table with the no logging mode, then do the import, then creates the indexes in no logging mode. When all of that operation is complete, it will do the alter table and then make everything log. So basically, it doesn't like the archive logs. So this is good when you are doing huge imports. You don't need to generate archive logs. But if your database is running in forced logging mode, this doesn't happen. Because you have a standby database and you enable forced logging, then it is forcibly logged. It doesn't matter what we say here. This is also something cool where right now in 11g, when you export a view, you get only the definition. You don't get the data from the view. But if you want to get, you have a complex view in the table and it is giving you nice summary data of some information, and you want to export that data, you cannot do that today because either you have to create a table in the database and then export that table. But here in 12c, you have an option, view, export view as a table. So it will take the view and consider that view as a table and then export it as a table. So when you import it on the target database, it will create a table for you, not a view. It will create a table and put the data in there. So export view as a table. This is also good for lazy developers and lazy DBAs like me. So if you have a CSV file which got all the columns in a table, and I have a CSV file with all the columns, then you can use the express mode SQL loader load into the database. You don't have to create a control file. You just say SQL loader, the username, password, and the table name equal to employee. So it will look for a file called table name that whatever that employees.dat. It will look at that file and pick up that file and use a comma separated value, load into the table. You don't have to specify the control file. You don't have to create a control file, any of that. You just specify. You just make sure that the table column order is the same as your data file column order, the data order. That's the same. RMAN also has a lot of improvements. One big one is, RMAN client behaves like a SQL Plus. 5 minutes.
We're over, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, sorry. I'm pretty much, you know. Arman has a, Arman, the client, works similar to SQL+. So you can run pretty much any SQL statement in the Arman client. You don't have to specify the SQL, and within codes, you don't have to specify the statement within codes. All of that is gone away in 12c. You just use the Arman client as you use SQL+. So pretty much all the statements can be run in Arman client. And this one is big. You can restore a table from a full backup. So you have a full backup. Right now, if you want to restore a table, you have to identify the table space that it belongs to, and then system table space. You have to find the resources and the storage. Then you have to manually restore those table spaces, then export the table, and then import into a target database. Oracle does all that for you by specifying this. I mean, you can say recover table Scott, and you specify which backup to use or which time to use, and where should it create a temporary table space, with temporary database, and where should it put the dump file, and what is the dump file name, and if I want to import into the same table as the destination, or I want to create a different table with a different name. So I'm saying remap into, don't override the old table, just put in a different table. So all of this, the steps hasn't changed, but it is all automated. The DBA doesn't have to do any of this. The DBA just run it, get a coffee, or go home and come back and continue on. Hopefully, if there is enough space here.
So that your destination has to have enough space
Right.
for your whole database.
Yeah, whole database. So that's all I have here. I mean, if you are interested to learn more, there's a very nice poster available at TechNet. So you can go here. It shows your multi-tenant architecture, the background process, see what are the views, the performance views. All of that is available in one place. So you can go click this link. I'll have John send out the presentation to the group, so you all have this. So that is a good place to have that information. Then, if you want to learn more, the learning library has a lot of videos and OBE, Oracle by example. So Oracle gives short lessons on how you complete a task. So it's available in this link. It's an Apex learning library, very good. Go there, you can see a lot of tasks, how you do things in 12c database. So that's there. And if you are on social media, I mean, I have a Facebook and Twitter and Google also. So I do Oracle Tidbit. Basically, it gives you information on Oracle a little bit every day, one tidbit at a time. So, and thank you. That's all. Hopefully, see you at the next session in 10 minutes.
So we have coffee and some cookies back here. Compliments of like the bus. Did it right?
So
Regular cap and cream, some sugar, still pizza, with cold pizza, that's
that is right now, right? So 50 grams of yeah. So it's like what would you do?
So I took that
that's fine.
You start which columns are actually in the index.
Well, I think
feel like doing most of my presentation on these over 5 websites.
Oh, yeah, so like A plus?
Yeah, it's just leave that out.
Yeah.
So the topic is